All right, good morning, everyone. Bon matin à tous. My name is Jenna Sutz, and I have the honor of being the Member of Parliament here for Canada, but also the Parliamentary Secretary for Government Transformation, Public Works, Procurement, as well as supporting the Secretary of State for Defence Procurement. So it's a pleasure to welcome you all here to my riding of Canada. I want to acknowledge before we begin that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people, Indigenous peoples who have cared for these lands and waters since time immemorial. We are grateful for their stewardship and committed to respectful partnership. I want to take a moment as well to thank our hosts, Ian McLeod. I've lost him in the crowd now, but a big thanks, Ian, and to the whole MDA Space team for having us here today and giving us such a fascinating tour earlier this morning. I'm thrilled to be joined as well by my colleagues, Marie-France Lalonde, Yazer Nakvi, and Michael Ma. And of course, the Minister, David McGuinty. I do also want to take a moment to recognize some of our guests here today. The Honourable Colton LeBlanc, Nova Scotia Minister of Growth and Development and Minister of Acadian Affairs and Francophonie. The Honourable Greg Morrow, Nova Scotia Minister of Agriculture. Major General Jeff Smith. Stephen Matche, CEO of Maritime Launch Services. Hugh Colas, CEO of Canada Rocket Company, Bashar El-Hussein, CEO of Reaction Dynamics, and Rahul Joel, CEO of Nord Space, and of course as well Brian Gallant, CEO of Space Canada. So welcome to all of you. It's really a privilege to have this laboratory, this facility here in our city and in my community. For decades, Canada has been a major player for space. Arms, legs, robotics, medicines, a lot of these crucial investments were developed right here. For more than 50 years, you've helped build technologies that power our global telecommunication systems and make space exploration possible. And you've carried our critical research into our own planet, from our magnetosphere to our oceans and our lakes. Much of what Canada does in the space domain comes down to your hard work. So as we build up Canada's sovereign space capabilities, powered of course by our new Defence Industrial Strategy, we'll once again look to you, some of Canada's best and brightest minds, to deliver on the capabilities that we need to keep us moving forward and upwards towards the skies. Our investment in Canada's space capabilities are just one component of the Government of Canada's larger efforts to modernize the Canadian Armed Forces. We're investing in Canada's security, in our sovereignty, and in the people who defend our country and our values every day. The world is changing, and non-traditional domains like space are integral to our defense and our security. We are moving fast to do our part and to be ready. And that's what today's announcements are all about. We're proud to support the Canadian Armed Forces here in this facility and in this community. Besides being home to this laboratory and to the National Defence Headquarters, there's no shortage of defence companies just a few kilometres radius from this facility. From multinationals with Canadian headquarters here in Canada, whether that be MD Space, of course, MDA Space, or whether that be Lockheed Martin or JDMS, or of course a Canadian company, Calian. There's many companies, big and small, within this community. And many of the smaller companies, of course, building the next generation of innovative technologies for our military. We know firsthand that investing in Canada's defence has huge benefits for Canadian communities like ours here. It benefits our economy, our industries, and our workers. And for these and many other reasons, it's an honor to take part in today's announcement. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce the Minister of National Defence, David McGuinty. David.
Well done.
Pleasure.
Oops, that's not good. Ready here? Well, good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. It's a great honor to be with you here. It's a pleasure to join you today at this world-class facility here in Canada. Thank you to Ian and his team at MDA Space for welcoming us to the lab. I'm very, very pleased to be joined by colleagues from across the province, including Marie-France Lalonde, Yasser Naqvi, and Michael Ma. I'm also pleased to welcome Ryan Gallant, CEO of Space Canada, along with many partners from across Canada's space sector. It's an honor to be joined by so many leaders, researchers, and innovators from this community. Minister Greg Morrow, Minister Colton LeBlanc, thank you for joining us from Nova Scotia to mark this next chapter in Canada's space endeavours. I'm also grateful that we're joined today by members of our Canadian Armed Forces, whose work helps protect and advance Canada's interests here on Earth and increasingly in space. Over the weekend, the Prime Minister and I were in Norway to view Operation Cold Response, a NATO exercise in Norway's Arctic, which brings together tens of thousands of troops, including members of the Canadian Armed Forces. While we were there, Canada and Norway signed a letter of intent to deepen our cooperation in the space domain. As Arctic nations and NATO allies, strengthening our cooperation on space capabilities ensures that we are prepared for the future. And it's coming at us very quickly. Pour les Canadiens et les Canadiennes, l'espace, c'est plus qu'une vaste étendue à explorer. Elle est essentielle aux réseaux satellites et de communication sur lesquels nous nous fions chaque jour. Pour les opérations bancaires, l'aviation civile, les téléphones cellulaires et plus encore. Elle est tout aussi cruciale pour les membres des Forces armées canadiennes qui comptent sur ces systèmes pour la navigation et le maintien d'un avantage opérationnel face à nos adversaires. Today's space is no longer the benign environment we once hoped it would be, nor is it an emerging domain. It has emerged. It's here and incredibly important. Our adversaries are developing technologies that can be used in space to disrupt or destroy satellites. They're also leveraging artificial intelligence and quantum to threaten the technology that underpins our economy, our sovereignty, and our security. That's why Canada recognizes space as an operational domain, right alongside sea, land, air, and cyber. I was just in Yellowknife, where we announced over $35 billion in investment to build up our defences in the north. To have a fully interconnected system, from Yellowknife to Trenton, to ships and submarines at sea, and to fighter jets in the air, Canada needs its own space capability. But it's not only satellites that are critical to the defence and security of Canadians. It's access to space itself. It's why we're taking steps to strengthen our space capabilities so that we can launch from right here on Canadian soil. Simply put, every investment we make in space today and every technology that we develop is an investment in our economy, our people, our security, and our sovereignty. That's why I'm thrilled to announce that the Department of National Defence has signed a 10-year, $200 million agreement with Maritime Launch Services. As part of Canada's Sovereign Launch Program, this agreement will support the construction of a launch pad for use by the Department of National Defence, the Canadian Armed Forces, and the wider Government of Canada. Maritime Launch Services will build this spaceport facility at a site near Canso, Nova Scotia. It's an ideal location for operating safely and efficiently thanks to its natural geography and proximity to the open ocean. Under this agreement, Maritime Launch Services must spend 90% of the $200 million here in Canada, which means $180 million is going back to Canadian businesses. This investment not only supports our national defence, it will create high-value jobs and contribute to the Nova Scotia economy. To give all of us a sense of the magnitude of opportunity, there are thousands of satellites waiting to be launched. Thousands. Over the next 5 years, the world could see as many as 70,000 satellites launched into low Earth orbit. It will also generate huge opportunities for Nova Scotia, Canada, and the Canadian Armed Forces. So as we prepare for a new era of Canadian activity in space, I'm pleased to announce that we have chosen 3 outstanding Canadian companies for the first phase of our Launch the North contest through the IDEAS program. And through Launch the North, we're developing Canadian-designed vehicles and technologies to launch Canadian payloads from Canadian soil. And the winners are the following: Nord Space from Markham, Ontario; Canada Rocket Company from Toronto, Ontario; and Reaction Dynamics from Montreal, Quebec. Congratulations. Congratulations to all 3 companies and to the representatives who are here with us today. Your innovative spirit, your dedication to excellence are shaping Canada's future in space. Soon, each of you will receive $8.3 million to turn your ideas into working prototypes for testing in Phase 2 of the project. This investment in Canadian innovation comes at a time when the global space economy, wait for it, is expected to reach about $2 trillion in value by 2040. $2 trillion. Simply put, investing in a sovereign launch capability today will benefit Canada and our space industry for generations to come. The defence needs are clear, but let's not forget that sovereign space capability will help Canada fight wildfires, floods, map ecological areas on land and sea. This is a dual-use technology that will help us defend our sovereignty and address our natural security challenges. Also today, I'm pleased to announce that Canada intends to become a full member of NATO Starlift. NATO Starlift, this is a big development. It's bolstering a network of space launch sites across the Alliance. This will allow NATO members to deploy satellites and other space systems at a moment's notice in response to evolving defense and security needs. And they'll be able to do this from Canada. Projet à haute visibilité de l'OTAN, Starlift réunira les investissements et l'expertise des pays membres pour fournir plus efficacement les capacités essentielles dont nous avons besoin. Nous continuerons à faire notre part pour soutenir nos alliés et nos partenaires internationaux dans tous les domaines, y compris dans l'espace. Et nous continuerons à travailler main dans la main avec l'OTAN, car nous savons que nous sommes plus forts quand nous collaborons. This reminds me of the advice my saintly mother used to give to her 10 children. She would say we had a choice to make. If you decide to pull apart, you will feel like you're 5. But if you pull together, you will feel like you're 20. And that's what we're doing as we propose Canada's capacities to our NATO allies. We're pulling together, and that lesson has stayed with all of us, I think. It holds true in how we collaborate with our allies and with industry to boost and to build those tools we need to defend our freedom and our democracy. A word about Canada's defence industrial strategy, which is about making generational investments into capabilities that are critical to our defence. Military capabilities that we build and we control. It's about growing the number of high-skilled jobs and small and medium-sized businesses that make up Canada's world-class defence sector. It's about the radar company in Trois-Rivières, Quebec, with 10 employees, moving to 50. If we do this right, our military members will have the tools and infrastructure they need when they need them for decades to come. And it means that as we reinvest, rearm, and rebuild our capabilities, we're also creating jobs and supporting the economy so that all Canadians can benefit. En octobre dernier, le Premier ministre a mis sur pied l'Agence de l'investissement pour la défense, ayant pour but de simplifier notre acquisition d'équipements militaires, d'éliminer les processus inefficaces et le fardeau administratif, d'apporter plus de clarté à l'industrie, de renforcer l'infrastructure industrielle de défense du Canada et d'attirer de nouveaux investissements au Canada. Nous nous servirons aussi de la nouvelle politique « Acheter canadien » « Buy Canadian » qui a pour choisir les fournisseurs et les produits canadiens dans la mesure du possible. Nous prévoyons que la stratégie industrielle de défense créera 125 000 emplois à l'échelle du pays, augmentera les exportations dans le domaine de la défense de 50 % et fera plus que doubler les revenus de l'industrie canadienne. Ensemble, ces mesures appuient nos opérations militaires au pays et à l'étranger, tout en contribuant à l'économie canadienne. The Defence Industrial Strategy positions space launch as a key capability for Canada as well. It also commits to greater independence, stronger supply chains by building this capability ourselves. Today's announcement builds on that commitment. They're putting us on the path to launch satellites and payloads from Canadian soil, on Canadian-built rockets, at Canadian-run facilities. These investments strengthen our national security. They ensure our economic competitiveness. They support our allies and our international partners, and they can position Canada as a global leader in space. As I like to say, we can compete and we can win. Before wrapping up, I want to recognize the talented people working in Canada's space industry. To the thousands of you who every day get up and give it your very best, your expertise, your commitment, your innovative spirit, your risk-taking. These are so essential to our national security and our future. And while these announcements today are about launch sites and rockets, they're also about ensuring that Canada can respond to our biggest defence and security challenges in a rapidly changing world. And we do face these challenges. They're about creating good jobs, strengthening the economy, supporting Canadian businesses right across the country. They're about making sure we're providing the Canadian Armed Forces with the resources they need to carry out their demanding work. Mais au fond, ce que nous annonçons aujourd'hui nous permettra d'agir de manière plus indépendante et de maintenir ses capacités à long terme. C'est ainsi que nous relèverons les défis d'aujourd'hui et de demain, que nous appuierons nos alliés et partenaires internationaux et que nous affronterons nos adversaires qui nous attaquent sur terre, de la mer, des airs, du cyberspace ou de l'espace. Thank you for having us here today, and let's continue working towards a more secure and prosperous future for all Canadians. And now it's my pleasure to turn it over to Brian Gallant, the very strong and capable CEO of Space Canada, who continues to help us champion the strength, the innovation, and the global leadership of the Canadian space sector. Thank you very much. Brian, over to you.
Defense, sovereignty, economic security, manufacturing, STEM jobs, highly paid jobs, connectivity to rural, remote, Indigenous and northern communities, climate monitoring, protecting our environment, forests, oceans, coastlines, borders, our economic interest, and our people. These are just some of the promises of investing in Canada's space-based capabilities. To seize the opportunities stemming from the space sector, Canada indeed must build and sustain a fully integrated end-to-end space sector, which includes the certainty of being able to launch satellites from Canadian soil, thus reducing reliance on foreign providers and ensuring reliable access to space-based defense assets. C'est pour ces raisons que je suis tellement ravi d'être ici parmi vous aujourd'hui. You could even say I'm over the moon to be here today with you all at this out-of-this-world announcement. Okay, enough with the puns. I'm just going to launch into my remarks. That one got a few people. That's great. Excellent. Je suis tellement fier d'être ici au nom des au-delà de 100 membres d'Espace Canada. We're an organization that represents the Canadian space ecosystem. The companies that have been already mentioned and acknowledged for their innovation are members of ours, and we're extremely proud of the work that they have done and happy to be here to celebrate this milestone, but also to talk about the future and how we're going to continue to collaborate. It's an exciting time for space here in Canada included. Of course, there's much going on, a lot that we had discussed today, but I want to say one thing kind of off topic because I'd be remiss if I didn't say this. The Artemis launch happening in about 2 weeks now on April 1st. CSA astronaut Jeremy Hansen will join 3 NASA astronauts to go around the moon. Jeremy, an incredible ambassador for Canada and frankly for humanity, will be the first non-American to leave Earth's orbit. So let's give him a round of applause for the work he's going to do. La stratégie industrielle de la défense récemment publiée montre clairement que le gouvernement du Canada comprend à la fois l'importance stratégique de l'espace dans la défense moderne et les forces de calibre mondial de l'écosystème spatial canadien. Tout aussi important, elle reconnaît que le maintien de la sécurité et de la souveraineté exige des investissements continus ainsi que des politiques adaptées pour renforcer et développer ses capacités. Space is strategically vital to modern defense and represents a major economic opportunity for Canada given the projected rapid growth of the global space sector to which Minister McGuinty has already referenced. With world-class capabilities across our space system, Canada must adopt policies and make investments that enable our space industrial base. A key step is further developing sovereign space launch capability, ensuring we can support growing global demand while protecting both our economic and national security interests. Espace Canada et ses membres ont hâte de continuer de travailler avec le gouvernement du Canada afin de renforcer la base industrielle spatiale du pays, tout en offrant les capacités spatiales dont notre pays et ses alliés ont besoin dans un contexte géopolitique de plus en plus complexe. To conclude, we want to thank the Minister, his team, and the government for their commitment to further develop Canada's sovereign space launch capability, build up Canada's space industrial base, and in doing both these things, strengthen our country's ability to defend itself and its allies. Merci beaucoup. Onwards and upwards. And on that note, I invite MP Suds to come back to the podium.
Thank you so much, Brian. It's obvious you love what you do, and thank you for being such a champion for the space sector here in Canada. Thank you, of course, Minister McGuinty. Thank you to everyone for joining us here today as we mark what is definitely an important milestone in Canada's space capabilities. So with that, I believe we will now open the floor to questions, and I think Allison, perfect, will field.
Bonjour tout le monde. Hi everyone. We will now take questions from the media. On va maintenant prendre les questions du média. C'est un question, un suivi. We'll take one question, one follow-up. Please identify your outlet and your name.
Hi there, Laura. Oh. Hi there, Laura Osman with The Logic. Minister McGuinty, can you please explain whether geopolitical factors are lending itself to the necessity for Canadian sovereign launch capability, whether sort of changing security relationships require Canada to have this kind of capability for its own?
Well, I would begin by saying that the decision to diversify, the decision to create a defense industrial strategy, the decision to identify 10 core areas called sovereign capabilities, this was well in motion before the situation in the Middle East erupted. The fact that it has erupted, I would say in some ways is of course, tragic, but also fortuitous in terms of the investments we're making and our plans to move forward. We've made a decision to diversify. We've made a decision to build our own sovereign capabilities at home based on our needs. What can we build here? Turns out we have an incredible depth of space engineering talent, as we've seen in the 3 companies that have won the awards. We're going to be bringing folks back from other parts of the world, and I would invite anybody who's living abroad who happens to be Canadian or elsewhere who wants to come in and join us on this journey, please let us know. And so at the same time, what we're doing is we are diversifying. We have decided what the 10 core areas are for us going forward, and we're executing on that plan. And so today's announcement for sovereign launch capabilities is very much about this, and it's picking up on the tradition of incredible research that's gone on in this building with the folks who are here, the folks who are joining these teams. I'm hearing about launch situations in Atlantic Canada where hundreds, if not thousands, of kids are lining up, showing profound interest in this area. Young girls and boys. This is exactly what we need. So we are moving forward as we had anticipated doing, and today is the culmination of one of those next steps in a core area for us.
And so what does it mean for Canada not to have this launch capability for our defense sector? What is the impact of not having that, and what are we gained by
Well, it means that
that
we're vulnerable to reliance on others in terms of satellite capabilities. It means that we need our own satellite capabilities to be able to, for example, effect a number of the investments we're making that we announced this week in the Arctic, where we will be connecting our fighter jet fleet to on-the-ground connections, to our Coast Guard vessels, to submarines, and beyond, for a pan-domain awareness of what's going on in the Arctic. We're going to need that capacity for ourselves. So these are the kinds of investments we're making as we step up our protection of the Arctic, for example, but they're also very important. I mean, I learned during my briefings, about 20% of the Canadian economy every day relies on satellites. Our banking system, our cell phone systems, our transactions, ordering goods. For those of you who order food to your front doors, we're relying on satellites. So we want to be able to give ourselves more sovereignty and more security on that front. Thank you.
Minister, if you could just repeat the first answer en français, s'il vous plaît.
The first question was?
Par rapport au contexte géopolitique et à l'importance d'une telle annonce dans ce contexte-là.
Nous planifions depuis quand même plus qu'1 an le développement de nos capacités, nos capacités souveraines qui sont reflétées dans notre stratégie industrielle du développement. Donc, on continue la poursuite de la mise en œuvre de ces domaines clés, et ça comprend l'espace. C'est une question d'investir pour notre sécurité et notre souveraineté. C'est une question de ne plus se fier directement et seulement sur d'autres. C'est d'avoir notre propre capacité de communication. Là, évidemment, ça a des applications au niveau militaire, mais aussi économique. Comme je viens justement de dire, 20% de notre économie dépend tous les jours sur notre système de satellites. Donc, nous sommes vulnérables. Nous sommes assujettis à des risques avec des joueurs énormes qui sont dans l'espace, qui peuvent, par exemple, compromettre notre accès aux satellites. Et voilà pourquoi nous investissons pour débuter avec un système de lancement de satellites dans l'espace.
Next question.
Good morning, Ashley Burke, CBC News. Minister McGuinty, does Canada have the capacity or the desire to send naval ships to the Gulf to protect tanker traffic, as Trump demanded?
Let me maybe go back to the context of the situation in the Middle East. It's rapidly evolving. Every several hours, I get updates on some of the risks. There is a war being prosecuted by 2 states, and there is a response from another. The situation is in flux. It's evolving. But I want to be very clear on this. This is a point I've made in my speech in the House, so I'll make it again. Canada was not consulted before the prosecution of this particular war. Canada is not involved in the prosecution of this war, and Canada has no intention of being involved in the prosecution of this war. So there has been no formal ask of Canada with respect to playing a deliberate offensive role in the prosecution of this war. And so that's where we stand today. And Canada is monitoring the situation. Our first and foremost priorities were twofold. One, get Canadian citizens out of harm's way if they wanted to get out of the region. And we are working on that hour by hour, 24 hours a day with teams here and teams in the Middle East. And two, making sure that any members of the Canadian Armed Forces, any personnel who were in the region, were out of harm's way and were safe and sound. And that is the situation.
So no desire to send naval ships, and you haven't had an ask from the U.S., but will you move forward with sending with any military support for Gulf countries looking for support?
The question of assistance to neighboring Gulf countries is one that we're considering. It will depend on the nature of any kind of ask. It will depend on the nature of what assistance we can provide. For operational reasons, I can't go into any more detail than that, except to say that these would be considered thoughtfully. And so we will, if there's any news on that front, we will announce it.
Yasmine Mehdi avec Radio-Canada. Je vais faire du pouce sur la question de ma collègue. Donc, le président Trump demande à l'OTAN de l'aider à assurer la sécurité maritime dans le détroit d'Ormuz. Donc, pas une opération offensive, pas dans le cadre de l'opération Fury. Est-ce que le Canada serait prêt à aider dans le détroit d'Ormuz, comme le demande le président Trump?
À ce moment-ci, je vais être très clair là-dessus. Le Canada n'a pas été consulté dès le début de cette attaque par le gouvernement, les Israéliens, les Américains. Deuxièmement, nous ne sommes pas impliqués du tout au niveau offensif. Et troisièmement, nous n'avons aucunement l'intention d'y participer. Je vais être clair là-dessus. Mais c'est une situation qui évolue très, très vite. C'est une situation où, par exemple, ce qui se passe en Iran est très difficile à percevoir. Il y a des missiles qui sont envoyés vraisemblablement à gauche et à droite, sans logique, selon nos experts opérationnels chez Défense et chez les Forces armées canadiennes. Donc, on suit de très près ce qui se passe, heure par heure. La question de participation n'est pas avec nous présentement. Nous avons dit clairement que le Canada n'a aucunement l'intention de participer au niveau offensif. Et voilà où nous sommes rendus. Les priorités étaient deux, il y en avait deux. Sortir le plus vite possible les Canadiens et les Canadiennes qui étaient pris dans la région, qui voulaient sortir, et on en a aidé beaucoup. Et deuxièmement, s'assurer que la présence de nos forces armées canadiennes dans la région, que ces membres des forces armées canadiennes sont sains et saufs. Et c'est exactement la situation aujourd'hui.
Donc, j'en comprends, pas d'intervention canadienne possible dans le cas d'Ormuz en ce moment. Et par ailleurs, Donald Trump a dit qu'il y aurait des conséquences pour l'OTAN si ses alliés ne l'aidaient pas dans le détroit d'Ormuz. Qu'est-ce que vous répondez à cette menace du président Trump?
Ce que je réponds, c'est qu'on travaille de très près en partenariat avec les Américains depuis une centaine d'années, et ça continue. On travaille ensemble à l'OTAN. Je suis en consultation avec mes collègues ministres de l'OTAN. C'est à voir. On ne sait pas exactement ce que ça veut dire, mais on continue. Et comme je vous ai dit, on suit de très près la situation. Et s'il y a des changements, on aura plus à dire là-dessus.
And if you could just say that in English as well for my colleagues about Trump and his threats to NATO.
The question of the White House's overture to NATO members and participation in the Strait of Hormuz is something that all NATO members are examining. We have no intention of getting involved offensively in the prosecution of the war in the region. That is a choice made by the Israeli and American governments. Obviously, we're talking amongst NATO members. We will continue to consult. But we've always managed to find a way to manage our relationship with the United States, and we will manage our way through this as well.
Hi, Minister. Thank you for taking our questions. Kyle Duggan from the Canadian Press. So just to be clear, you're leaving the door, your government is leaving the door open to helping secure the Strait of Hormuz?
We're leaving the door open to be, I think, of assistance to any neighboring states that might require such assistance. But we will not be engaging offensively in this war. I want to be very clear. We are not going to be engaging offensively in this war. And the question of the Strait of Hormuz is one that is evolving. It's changing. It's hard to get hard information, to be honest with you, in terms of what's going on in the width of that particular strait. We're not quite sure what the overture was or is not, so we're going to talk amongst our NATO allies, and we will govern ourselves accordingly.
Thank you. And Poland's army is banning Chinese electric vehicles from entering military bases over concerns that they could collect sensitive data. This is the so-called spy cars argument. Is that something that Canada would consider, or that your government is not concerned about? Thank you.
About Chinese spy vehicles?
At bases.
At bases. To my knowledge, I don't think we're purchasing vehicles from China right now that are operational at any one of our 33 bases, nor in our forward operating location in Latvia. It's an interesting development. I'm sure the Polish authorities have their own reasons for doing so. We'll take close note of it.
Like allowing CAF members who have like a Chinese EV, allowing them to drive into the base, that kind of thing?
Well, that's a question I'll raise with the operational folks on our bases. Thank you.
Morning, Ministers. Alex Reel, BetaKit. Just a quick question about the spaceport. As far as I'm aware, Maritime Launch Services has experienced a few delays in getting the spaceport operational. Is it operational right now? And is any of this money committed to completing the construction of the spaceport, or is it just the lease?
We're moving forward at breakneck speed. I'll be honest with you, a year ago I wasn't sure if we were going to get here as quickly as we have, and we have because of the incredible dedication of people in this room and beyond. Support from Nova Scotia, support from MDA, support from the companies involved, support. What we've indicated here, what's really important for Canadians to understand, is we've made a decision. And the decision is we're getting fully back into the space business. We have been, but we're getting even more aggressively into the space business. I was just in Norway, where we signed a new deal cooperating with Norwegian authorities on space capabilities. I heard from my German counterpart there. We heard from my Indian officials, from Australian officials, from Japanese officials. There's a tremendous pent-up demand to obviously get satellites into space, and a pent-up demand and interest to work with Canada. And Canada's in a really unique position right now to be able to stand this up and get it ready to go so that our partners can join us in these initiatives. This is a question of doing right and doing well at the same time. And that's exactly what the Defence Industrial Strategy seeks to do. Address our Canadian domestic, operational, military, and security and defence needs while giving rise to new industrial enhanced investments in a sector. And that's what this announcement is all about.
Thank you. And what made the government go with Maritime Launch over other competitors, such as, say, Nordspace, or even building public infrastructure?
They're a good company. And we work with good companies. They're all good companies. A decision was made. There's going to be room for expansion here. It's like I mentioned. There's a small radar company in Trois-Rivières, Quebec. There are 9 or 10 engineers there. We'd like to see them go from 9 or 10 to 100. There are companies here that are lined up, employing 20 or 50 individuals. We want to see them go to 100 or 500. If we get this right, and we will, the capacity for growth is enormous. There'll be lots of room for lots of folks to play in this space and to be able to assist us in doing our jobs and giving our military and our defense folks what they need.
Thank you.
Hi there, David Aiken, Global News. I'd like to challenge you a bit on, we're back in the space business. The budget for the Canadian Space Agency in the fiscal year ending is $1.4 billion. It will be $400 million less next year, and by fiscal 29, it will be 1/3 the size that it is that. What's happening at the CSA? Your government is cutting the lunar rover. That's getting out of the space business. You mentioned Wild Forces Sat. Budget 2022 contained cuts to that program, and those cuts are continuing. Do you want to maybe revise that you're in the space business, given that it's $100 million funding today, $400 million less for the CSA?
Yeah. I think what I say in response to that is, look, our government has a responsible plan to move towards a balanced budget eventually. That's going to take some time, we recognize that. But I'd also like to challenge back a little bit on that front. The Prime Minister is spending a lot of his time with some of the world's top investment firms, sovereign wealth funds, did that in Australia, did it in Japan, did it in Norway with the world's largest sovereign wealth fund, to be able to say that Canada is open for business in a very significant way. And we're very clear in indicating where we'd like to invest, certainly on the defense industrial strategy side, which includes space. What I'm hearing from around the world is we want to join Canada. We want to come in and help with these investments. We want to see public dollars leverage private dollars, for example, in classified research settings, something we don't have in place right now. And what we're going to be doing here is leveraging an awful lot of private sector investment. Canada can compete and win. Canada can build these companies. Canada can skate. If you want to win a Stanley Cup, you got to field the Stanley Cup team. And that's exactly what we're doing through this announcement today.
Thank you. As a bit of a follow-up, your department is one of the departments that's not really having to go through the expenditure review. You're getting more money. Lots of other departments are getting less. I mentioned the CSA. Might it be fair to say if you're an MDA or you're a company in the private sector, you maybe want to think, how does my whatever service I'm offering, might it have a military component? And for better or for worse, that government is open to defending or funding military projects. Pure science, maybe not so much. It's
a priority. Pure science is a priority, and military applications are a priority. The threat landscape has changed, David. There are many actors in space now that are up to nefarious conduct, and we know this. So we have to be able to anticipate it. We have to be able to defend against it. We must make sure that our sovereignty is protected, that we're not dependent on third parties who might put at risk our connectivity through satellites. I mentioned earlier, 20% of the Canadian economy every day relies on one shape or form on access to satellite connectivity. We want to make sure that we protect Canada's security and sovereignty. So if you're telegraphing to me that a message is being sent to Canadian society that we have defense priorities in this area, yes, we do. We do, and we want to see defense investments occur in a way that keep us secure and sovereign.
Merci tout le monde. That concludes our press conference. And if I could just invite the recipients of today's awards to go up to the front, take a photo. That concludes the event. Thank you very much.
Hey, good job.